Well, hi everyone. My name is Enia Solis, an industrial engineering student, and today we're going to be exploring a new insight in one of the most controversial topics from 2020. In 2020, for the first time in years, the world officially stopped. The COVID-19 pandemic had a great impact in the global supply chain, causing disruptions and challenges across various countries. As countries implemented lockdown measures and social distancing protocols to curb the spread of the virus, supply chains faced an unprecedented disruptions in production, transportation, and demand patterns. It affected the interconnected web of suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, highlighting the vulnerabilities and complexities inherent in modern supply chains. To have a further understanding on the topic, I have conducted a brief investigation which led me to the Ernst & Young Global Limited firm, dedicated to consulting, strategizing, transactions, among other services. In this interview, we will be reviewing this interesting case with two consultants from this firm, Juan Ignacio Honnold and Alejandra Rosas, since they have previously analyzed this critical aspect of the global trade and commerce in this article, How COVID-19 Impacted Supply Chains and What Comes Next, published last year.
Hi, Anya. Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here. I heard you had some questions you wanted to ask us. If you would like to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's a pleasure to have you here. Well, firstly, what made you want to research this topic and how did you do it?
Well, first of all, we all know that the pandemic caught everyone off guard. So we thought that it would be important to know how it was affecting big supply chains globally. We decided to make a survey of all the senior level supply chain executives that we could, and they ended up being around 200. We conducted this survey back in the late 2020s and then again recently in September 2022. And the results were pretty interesting, that's for sure.
And what were the most significant findings that you had with this survey?
Well, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, though through the survey, we found that in some areas it brought to light previously unseen variables in their supply chain, including staff shortages and losses due to closures. But overall, it has accelerated and magnified problems that already existed in the supply chain. We also found that enterprises plan to shake up their supply chain strategies to become more resilient, sustainable, and collaborative with their customers, suppliers, and stakeholders. To do that, they will increase investment in supply chain technologies like AI, robotic processes, automation, and control towers, while also trying to retain as much workers as they can.
And what do you think were the sectors that were hit the hardest during this pandemic?
In general, most companies were affected negatively if they were not prepared for it. Actually, around 72% of companies that answered the survey, they responded that they were affected negatively. But the sector that was the most affected in this negative way, according to the survey, it was the automotive sector and the industrial products companies because they especially claimed that their workforce was disrupted and they had to adapt to new requirements. Also, industrial products and high-tech manufacturing companies are now investing overwhelmingly in technologies to reduce the exposure of their employees to COVID-19 in these labor-intensive industries.
And were there any positive effects that COVID had?
Well, actually, yes, there were. Around 11% of companies surveyed reported positive effects. Well, these companies were mostly in the life sciences sector, and the positive effects may have largely been because the products they produce are essential for people. Well, the pandemic also required some life sciences companies to double down on creating essential new products such as the COVID-19 tests or vaccines. Another positive could be, for example, supply chain finally got a voice and much needed investment in technical capabilities. For example, many organizations are building advanced analytics to do dynamic SKU rationalization rather than doing one-off spreadsheet exercises when inventory gets too high or the next crisis requires optimization.
And now that both of you have incredibly a lot of experience in the supply chains, how do you think that they have changed after this pandemic? And what are their priorities now?
I mean, the survey really indicates that right now, and as a priority, there's visibility, efficiency, and the reskilling of the supply chain workers. These will be top priorities for these companies. In the future, also maybe agility, visibility, automation, and upskill people will be the key, which all of this together will drive not only the cost reductions, but also better decision making. The surveys also showed that supply chain visibility was a top three priority in the late 2020 survey, as well as in the 2022 survey that we recently had.
And how do they plan on increasing this visibility that you just mentioned?
Well, that's a good question. Well, there are technologies being integrated, such as IoT devices or sensors that provide vulnerable data on where goods are in the chain and their condition. For example, products for which temperature monitoring may be critical, such as frozen foods, vaccines, or medicine. There is also cloud-based platforms for collaboration among suppliers and supply chain orchestration for supply chain, like control towers, also increased in terms of piloting and adaptation. Top workforce measures identified in the survey are increased automation and investments in IA and machine learning.
And are there any specific technologies that companies plan on using now, apart from the AI ones?
Well, including the AI that we mentioned, also our 2022 research, our report shows that there's a race on in for the digital enablement and automation. So by 2035, around 45% of the supply chains, they're expected to be mostly autonomous. This means that there will be robots in the warehouses, in the stores, or there's going to be driverless forklifts and trucks, maybe delivery drones, and everything would be fully automated. And yeah, and also we should mention again the investments that they're doing in artificial intelligence and machine learning.
And how do you think that the artificial intelligence can help in the supply chain management?
Well, we believe that organizations use AI technologies across the end-to-end supply chain to help make predictive and prescriptive decisions. An example is responding to a change in customer demand seen instantly by the entire supply chain, like organizations and its supplier and their suppliers, their customers, etc. So they can collectively adjust supply plans and production schedules immediately. Well, ultimately, digital and autonomous technologies will help make people's jobs easier and the supply chain more efficient and optimized in the long run.
And well, as we already know, the supply chains are always evolving. They're in um, we're in constant evolvement. And what do you think that comes next for these supply chains? Are there any priorities that we should take into account?
Well, I think that the supply chain of the future will need to be agile, flexible, efficient, resilient, and also digitally networked for our improved visibility. Also, the enterprises, they urgently need to design a supply chain organization that will fit the new digital and autonomous focused era. I think there's five things that companies should focus on right now and in the next few years. First of all, they should reimagine their strategic architecture of their supply chain. They should really change and adapt. They should also build transparency and resiliency. They should also extract cash and cost from their supply chain. Um, they should create a competitive advantage with their sustainability. And lastly, I think they should drive agility and the opportunities for growth through a digital supply chain.
And what would be your main takeaways or recommendations that you would have for this investigation?
Well, what I would personally take from the survey results is to invest in digital technology such as cloud-based platform collaborations or automation and data analytics and AI at speed. It is also important to continually put humans at the center of your efforts and empower them to do extraordinary things and innovate with customers in mind truly through a sustainable supply chain. Following this path, your enterprise will be better prepared to manage whatever crisis comes next, turning potential disruptions into tremendous opportunities.
Well, firstly, I want to thank Juan Ignacio and Alejandra for joining us today in this interview and letting us gain some knowledge on the impact that COVID had in our daily global operations network, still leaving a lasting impact in the supply chain today. It exposed several vulnerabilities and limitations within supply chains that we could have never imagined. And companies were forced to adapt rapidly to the changing circumstances, implementing new strategies and technologies to mitigate the impact of the disruptions that I just mentioned. Well, the crisis highlighted the importance of robust risk management, diversification of suppliers, and the need for resilient and agile supply chains. And as the world recovers and moves forward, the lessons learned from the pandemic will continue to shape the future of supply chain management, driving innovation, digitalization, and a renewed focus on the preparedness for future crises, since we already know that they are possible. So the COVID-19 pandemic serves as a reminder of the critical role of supply chains in their global trade and the need for continuous adaptation and resilience in our world. So thank you so much for your time and for giving us a little insight on what is working with supply chains.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.